History is often written by the victors, but it is felt by the seekers. 2,000 years ago, two different kinds of power were on a collision course in the ancient city of Jerusalem. On one side was Herod the Great. He was a man who had reached the pinnacle of earthly success. He was a master builder, a political genius, and a brutal protector of his own shadow. They called him the Great, but his greatness was a fortress built on a foundation of paranoia. He sat on a throne of gold and cedar, yet he was a prisoner within his own walls, convinced that every whisper in the hallway was a plot and every shadow was a rival. Hundreds of miles to the east, three other men were moving through the silence of the desert. These were the Magi. In our modern world, we call them wise men, but the word Magi implies something much deeper. They were the scientists, the astronomers, and the philosophers of their age. They were men who lived in the quiet world of books, mathematics, and the stars. While Herod was looking down at his maps and his tax records, the Magi were looking up. They weren't seeking a throne, they were seeking a truth. They left behind their comforts, their families, and their reputations to follow a light that didn't fit into their calculations. This is the meeting that changed everything. It wasn't just a royal visit, it was a confrontation between a king who wanted to rule the world and men who wanted the world to be ruled by light. When the Magi arrived in Jerusalem, the atmosphere changed instantly. Imagine the scene, a caravan of wealthy foreign intellectuals covered in the dust of the road, riding through the city gates. They didn't go to the marketplaces or the inns. They went straight to the center of power. And they asked a question that acted like a spark in a room full of gunpowder. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. To the common people, this was a whisper of hope, but to the palace, it was a declaration of war. The Bible tells us that when Herod heard this, he was troubled and all Jerusalem with him. Why was the city troubled? Because they knew Herod. They knew that when the king felt threatened, the streets ran red. Herod wasn't just a king, he was a system. He was the status quo. And the Magi were accidentally announcing that the status quo was about to be overturned. Herod's reaction was immediate. He didn't erupt in anger. He became cold. He became calculated. He gathered his own religious experts, the scribes and the priests, and demanded to know where the ancient prophecies said this Messiah would be born. When they pointed to Bethlehem, Herod's plan began to take shape. Herod called the Magi to a private meeting. This is the verses moment. Imagine the contrast. Herod, dressed in royal purple, smelling of expensive oils and wine, leaning forward in the flickering torchlight. Across from him, the Magi, weary, humble, but possessed of a quiet dignity that gold cannot buy. Herod didn't act like a tyrant. He acted like a seeker. He used the language of faith to hide the heart of a killer. He leaned in and said, "Go and search carefully for the young child, and when you have found him, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also." This was the trap. Herod was trying to recruit the Magi into his service. He wanted to use their wisdom to feed his cruelty. He offered them his favor, his protection, and his blessing. For the Magi, this was a moment of incredible social pressure. To be the guests of a king like Herod was a massive honor. To refuse him would be seen as an insult to the crown. But notice the human element here. The Magi were likely impressed. They were probably relieved that the local king was being so helpful. At this point in the story, they didn't see the monster behind the mask. They saw a fellow seeker. This is the moral crossroads we all face. Sometimes, the path that seems the most official or helpful is actually a detour leading us into a trap. The Magi found the child. They gave their gifts, gold for a king,
frankincense for a god, and myrrh for a sacrifice. But the real story happens after the gifts are given. That night, the silence returned. In the stillness of sleep, a warning came, not from a king and not from a book. It was a divine intrusion. They saw the truth. They saw Herod's worship for what it really was, a sword hidden behind a smile. Now the tension is at its peak. They have a choice. If they go back to Jerusalem, they please the most powerful man in the region. They get a safe escort home. They keep their connections, but they would be leading a killer to a cradle. If they defy him, they become fugitives. They have to avoid the main roads. They have to travel through the rough, dangerous wilderness. They have to live the rest of their lives knowing they crossed a man who never forgets a grudge. The Bible says, "And being warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way."
This is where the story becomes our story. The meeting that changed everything wasn't just a conversation in the palace. It was the moment the Magi decided that the truth was worth more than their safety. Going another way is a moral act. It means that once you have encountered the truth, you cannot return to the person you used to be. You cannot go back to the toxic habits, the dishonest paths, or the Herods of your life who want to use you for their own ends. Wisdom isn't just about finding the right star, it's about having the guts to change your route when you realize you're on the wrong road. The Magi teach us that the most successful journey isn't the one that is the easiest, it's the one that keeps your soul intact. So, as you walk your own path today, remember the Magi. They chose the desert over the palace. They chose the unknown over a lie, and in doing so, they protected the hope of the world. What is your another way, and do you have the courage to take it? And please like and subscribe for more wonderful stories like this.